I've never really been a fan of anything smaller than 10 scale. Yeah, maybe 12 scale. But anything these tiny little vehicles can do, the big ones can do it better. And roughly for the same price. So is ProLine's new 1/25th scale ambush crawler scaler good enough for us? Let's hit the neighbor's yard and see if we can find some adventure in 1/25th scale. Only if you've been into RC for a long time do you know what 1/10th scale means. So to most, it doesn't mean anything, because I stacked 10 of these cars up right here, and it could be 1/10 of something bigger. But it's not. This is 1/25th scale. That means small. How small? Well, it's only relative to what you're driving on. This 2x4 makes it look big. My hand? Maybe I have small hands like Donald, but it's small in my hand. And that means you have to drive over things that are smaller. The compact chassis ladder frame is just like the big scale ones. Center diff drives out to the end with worm drive. Yeah, just like the Hunt for Red October, you have worm drive on this thing. What that means is the axles have constant pressure. You let off the brake and the truck stops. It's sort of like a drag brake, but not. You have to drive this different, which means constant throttle, or it's going to be jerky. As you can see, my herky-jerky worm drive skills are shown off in perfect fashion. I'll be the first to admit that my bias towards small scale probably comes from all the mini stuff that was made to go 50 miles an hour, which means you couldn't drive it on a 10 scale track and it was way too fast for normal people or normal conditions or anything. So this smaller vehicle with its slower speed meant I had to go out and find things that were scale enough for me to drive at the scale speed it's going to be at, which is pretty slow. I would say between 1 and 2 miles an hour. Even with its 3-speed options on the transmitter, it's not the fastest thing, but that means you have to find things that make it look fast. Plug in the battery. I like the USB pack. It should be like this on all cars. You have leaf spring suspension, just like the bigger rigs. The shocks have internal springs for dampening. The servo actually had more power than I would thought. It didn't have any problems turning the wheels left and right, so the servo saver wasn't weak. You can do a lot of crawling on things. As you can see here, my neighbor's yard seems like they set it up for scaling or trailing, because these little rocks were almost perfect for the 1/25th scale ambush and became a little bit of a challenge. And that's what this class is really going to be about, is you going out, finding something that's within scale, maybe even bringing a camera like this. I mean, all it takes is an iPhone these days, propped up, and try to make it look like you have a real truck driving through the woods, although those would be some big weeds. I'm going to address my biggest negative of this kit, and realistically this is why I dislike mini kits. They're pretty expensive. Although it's smaller, it has the same amount of parts as a big car, 1/10 scale, 1/8 scale, 1/5 scale. And size means nothing. It still costs a lot of money to make a mold, regardless of how much size it is, and the pennies in plastic it takes to fill that mold really doesn't matter. So at $200, it's a little bit expensive for me. And for the most part, a lot of these mini things were meant to go on your desk, climb over some pencils, maybe a stapler. So, but the fact that this ambush was able to go in my neighbor's yard and they didn't call the cops on me right away means that, I started to find a little bit of a soft spot for this car, because going over these little things, and although one of the other negatives is that worm drive you can see in the throttle response, at low speed it was a little bit hard to get a smooth transition, and that's kind of why you see a little bit more of stop and go than normally you would. It even has a brushed motor, so you can't blame it on brushless motor timing not having that low end feel. But it would still go over things. It actually ripped the weeds out of my neighbor's yard when it got tangled in there, so it had enough power. There was a few times that it had axle stall where it actually didn't have enough power to push the wheels over a rock or anything like that. But, that's the nature of the game. It's small, and you have to sometimes take that with the good with the bad. The car looks great. I mean, you got a little guy in there with his hat on backwards. He's a badass. The tires are ProLine copies. So they're not the softest rubber, but they work pretty well for this little guy. And overall, I had a really good time. And part of the fun was filming this, because you had to find things that looked interesting and lighting and stuff like that. So there is a lot of appeal to looking scale and creating something scale, which is why on the internet you'll see a lot of videos get huge amounts of views of some truck just driving through the woods with nobody talking, annoying you like I do. This is really ProLine's second attempt at a kit, and it's a little one. We're just hoping that this little one leads to something big. Come on, ProLine, you can make it 10 scale. We'll even give you a pass and make it 12 scale. We're ready. We love this kit, as long as we're scaling our neighbor's yard and they still don't call the cops. Read all about this kit and many others in Velocity RC Cars Magazine, issue number 23. We're digital, download it, look at it all day, watch a cat video again. We love cat videos. Here's some more crawler action. No annoying talking.